everybody. How you doing today? You're hitting the end of the conference. It's like the tired part, but we're going to be okay. So I'm here to talk to you about API design for JavaScript libraries and how you can do some sharing. So I will say up on the screen are my two kids, and the oldest one, Dalton, really likes to tell you that sharing is caring when he wants to eat the food you have on your dinner plate. So, who am I? I really think that you need know nothing other than semicolons tabs. All the code in the slides is semicolons tabs. In all seriousness, I work for Microsoft. I am a crisis management engineer. So if you're hosted on Azure and your things are not working, I am the person who is on the phone being like, everyone wake up. I am a maintainer of Moment.js. There are two of us here today. I don't know if some of you saw Matt's talk earlier, but I am a maintainer of Moment.js. In addition, I am the JS Foundation's representative to TC39. So I'm on the committee that makes ECMAScript, and I represent the JS Foundation, which is an awesome organization that supports open source projects in the JavaScript ecosystem. I could give a whole talk about the JS Foundation, but I'll simply tell you that if you have made an open source commit to a JavaScript project, we represent you. So if you would like representation at TC39, Leo Balter and myself are your representation as an open source committer. And on that note, I am the champion of the date rework proposal that was talked about earlier. So if you're interested in what's happening in JavaScript date, I'm working on that. But today, that is not what we're talking about. Today, what we're talking about is libraries. Is anybody here besides me a library author? Okay. All right. I'm going to bring up some libraries, and if it's one of yours and I got it wrong, you shout real loud, you got that library wrong, Maggie. So, what is a library? There are a lot of definitions for the word library, but what I'm going to go with is a library is a bit of code that's useful when it's packaged up and distributed to other people. This could be internal or external. So, there are tons of external libraries that we know about. Libraries like LoDash, jQuery, Q, Moment, Immutable, and Request. Those are all libraries, right? I think probably everybody in the room knows almost every one of those. All right. Internally, there's a tendency to make internal libraries. I know at Microsoft, we have like millions of internal libraries for the purposes of logging and analytics. Oh my gosh, I add internal libraries to everything for that. For the purpose of this talk, I do want to define what is not a library. I am going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say things like Express or Angular or Webpack are not libraries for the purposes of this talk. Instead, what Express or Angular would be a framework. They are a framework. They do a whole lot more than provide some useful code. They tell you how you should code. Webpack, on the other hand, would be a tool. It's a full tool suite. So I'm not going to consider those things libraries. One other thing I want to mention about this talk is that I'm going to get out examples from some of the libraries I have listed at the top. And we might think of those libraries as like lame, like jQuery's from 2007, guys. But the bottom line is these libraries have survived a really long time. So we're really into the new hotness in JavaScript, but for the purposes of this talk, I have stuck to libraries that we are all still NPM installing several years later, because longevity is good. Call me lame, it's okay. I can live with it. So here's what we think having a library is like. Anybody have kids? And yeah, who has kids? Whose kids behave like this all the time, like happy and playing? All right, so here's what having a library is actually like. Does anybody have this toy besides me? This is a toy only a grandparent would give you. There's two kids, there's some buttons, and there's some whipped cream. This is what having a library is like out in the open source space. Like that looked really fun, and then boom. Except in the open source space, it actually looks like this. Tim Wood, awesome guy, author of Moment.js, was like, I'm going to share and I'm going to care. And here we are 5 years later with 2,402 closed issues. And 176 open. That's what having a library is like. And your best defense against that is making it well. So, what makes a library good? Small size. I never want to hear about it again. Great code. Your users don't use your code. They're never going to look at it. Encourages functional programming practices. It's big right now, isn't it? Oh, wait. This is JavaScript, the amazing Node.js, Webpack, Babel, Mocha, Chai, Phantom, Sauce, Istanbul toolchain that I spent 12 weeks assembling. That made my library good. Guys, ease of use. Ease of use. Nobody wants to learn your library. They won't. Those 2,400 odd GitHub issues, 50% of them are, I did not read your documentation. It's okay to make it simple. You don't have to get into fancy patterns. Your users are just going to go, what's partial application? So, I'm going to break this out into 4 areas. 1, invocation. How do I invoke my library? How do I actually call it? 2, configuration. This is a huge part of any library. Like, it doesn't do what I want it to do unless I change this configuration this way. 3, defaults. What should the default behaviors of my library be? And finally, errors, which with the advent of Node.js and server-side JavaScript are no easy thing to deal with. So, invocation. Basically, for any library, there's 2 kind of simple ways to invoke it. 1 is static invocation, right? You just call a function. So here we have 2 great libraries that I think everyone here has probably touched. Request from Node, and this is a static invocation. I want to get google.com and I get a callback. It's just static. Or good old 27 million NPM downloads a month LoDash, who here hasn't used it, I'm asking for filter, and I get back a filtered list. Awesome. Static invocation is a great pattern. I would not shy away from it. For logging libraries, this is the way to go. It's easy. You just say .log, .error. It's easy for people to figure out. They don't have to think too hard about what's going on. So this is actually my go-to if I want to write a simple library. It has a drawback, though. Here's LoDash without using any of the chaining or functional features if I want to get the sum of some odd numbers doubled. We're going down, like this almost looks like a callback Christmas tree, but it's not. It's just LoDash. All right, so when you start getting into this kind of trap with your library, then you're probably going to move to doing something like a factory function. Now, many libraries have done really well with the factory function. Up here, I have Q. Everybody's used Q, right? Oh yeah, it returns promises, doesn't it? Q fundamentally is a library, it makes promises. And then you can do what you will with those promises. jQuery, good old ubiquitous jQuery, makes jQuery objects. Who learned that when they first started coding 10 years ago? And Moment, my library. By the way, I am going to shred Moment in my examples. I will tell you of my pain. But Moment, again, is a factory library. You invoke Moment and you get back a Moment object. And these kinds of things allow for some really, really good patterns to happen. A factory function is what's going to allow you to go into a chaining API, or at least it's one very good way to do that. So here we can see Q, again, we're doing fcall, which is going to give us a promise back. And then fundamentally, we can chain on another promise and chain on another promise because we just keep getting promises all the way down. So this is a super helpful way to invoke a library, to have it give an object back and then have that give an object back. There are some problems with chaining, but on the whole, it's worked really well for a lot of people. Here's Moment. The reason people love Moment is because it does a chaining API. Here, I am adding 3 days to the current time, and then I'm going to the start of that day, and then I'm going to a year ago. Gosh knows why I'd want to do that, but believe me, people have. And it reads really easy. I'm reading left to right. I'm not questioning, like, where is this invocation in the world? I'm just cruising along. jQuery, again, like for all that we like to rip on jQuery for the bad programming practices, man, does this get our work done. I still bring in jQuery if I have a mostly static like ASP.NET MVC web page. Why not? So the next set of patterns that I'd like to look at are configuration patterns. Now, almost every library in the world is going to need some form of configuration, and it can get pretty difficult for people to figure out how to do. So we'll take a quick look at Moment. This is Moment like circa 2012, and it was great. You had a date string, and you could either pass it into the Moment constructor and let the Moment constructor deal with it, or you could specify a format to make sure that the constructor got the right thing. This was beautiful. This was easy. Moment 2017, constructor. Here, you can construct with an array. You can construct a moment from another moment object. That will give you a copy. You can construct a moment from a date. I guess that makes sense. You can do a date string with a format in the English language or any other language. You can use strict mode, which will force you to match the pattern that you're supplying. You could combine language in strict mode. Oh, multiple formats. Maybe you're expecting 4 or 5 formats. I'm going to throw an array in there, and I still need to support language and strict mode. Whoa, like that was intense. By the way, having this kind of overloaded constructor, where your constructor is expecting like a billion options, I think, so Moment uses ES6 modules, and I think to actually like parse out this constructor, it happens in about 10 files that are all about 100 lines of code each, just to parse apart this madness. There's like type checking, and then what does this actually mean? This is not great. I'm going to give some credit here to my colleagues on the ECMA 402 committee. They've been putting together the new internationalization API. Has anybody used this? Oh yeah, the Intel API. Okay, so the ECMA 402 standard said, how are we going to do configuration? Because localization takes a heck of a lot of configuration. And they came up with this really simple paradigm. And for all that it isn't fancy, I love it. I think it's really going to serve JavaScript users over time, and it's this. I'm going to create a new date-time format here. I must know the locale for the format. The locale is required, right? So I put the required parameter here, and then everything else I need to know I put in an options object. Now this is used the world over in a million libraries, and it's used because it works. I'm easily specifying hour, minute, second, and time zone name formats without having a mess in my constructor, without having to chain defaults to the global object. Like none of that is happening. So options objects, it seems simple. It seems almost stupid for me to say, but they're going to get you a long way in cleaning up constructors like I showed you with Moment. The other thing that they do, and again, good old jQuery, you were beautiful. You really were, is they're going to let you have some pluggable business logic. If you actually go into options object land, then say you want the user to be able to define a behavior in the library, you're going to be able to do that with something like this. Here we have jQuery AJAX requests, still great after all these years. And if I want to handle a 404, I can pass a custom function. And if I want to handle a 500, I can pass a different custom function. This is beautiful. This is easy for the user. So basically, when it comes to configuration, do required parameters at the beginning of your constructor, and then tie the options object to the end. This is going to be the easiest way for anybody to invoke your library. Defaults. Now, defaults are a fascinating topic, and they're difficult to get right. Let's look at this. This is a plain HTTP request with the built-in Node.js APIs. I assume a lot of people here have done this, the plain no library HTTP request, and some interesting stuff is going on. What I want to do here is I want to get the Moment GitHub repo. So I'm going to timrwood/moment. Okay, great. I issue my GET request, and a few things get crazy here. I actually have to like continuous update stream concat response body. But what I want to call it is this. I get a redirect. 301, move permanently. And that's absolutely true because Tim moved the moment repo to the moment org like years ago. But now, because I got a redirect, I'm going to have to like start this whole process again. I'm going to have to go look for the redirect link that I got. That's kind of a pain. Request. Anybody here a request user? Right. This is a great library. It does a lot of good stuff for us, but a big one is it's going to automatically follow a redirect. So here, when I kick off my request for Tim Arwood moment, I actually get back like the repository I wanted with the data about it. It just automatically followed the redirect. Now what this is best by default. When was the last time that you got a redirect link and didn't want to follow it? Right. I'm sure it has happened, and I'm sure you can configure requests to not redirect, but like seriously, this is like 95% of the time, 99% of the time, you're gonna follow the redirect. So if there's an obvious right best answer, like that's like well over 90% case, then do it, right? But here's a flip side. I'm going to go back to moment. Nothing like trashing the library that I love so much. Here I have moment, and I'm passing in this date string. Let's point out 1025. And I get out 1725. Why? So here's what's actually going on with moment. Time is complicated. And when I pass in 1025 to the base moment constructor, I get back 1725 because it's converting it to local time. -5 here, and then I came to Berlin time, right? If in fact I had wanted UTC, I would use the UTC constructor. If I had wanted to stay in -5, I would use parse zone. If I had wanted a different time zone, for instance, New York, then I would use the time zone constructor. There's no good default here. Like, honestly, are any of those like the thing that you do all the time? Are any of those a 95% case? No. And like, this single API flaw has caused more support issues in Moment.js than any other thing by about 3 orders of magnitude. Like, people are like, why isn't this the date I thought it was gonna be? And all we really had to do was this. Instead of having that default just moment paren constructor, if we had made people choose, if we had made them say moment.local, they would have gone, oh, local time. And it would have saved us, I don't know how many hours. The next time we rev a major version, for me to deprecate the default moment constructor and put in local will be all of 30 minutes of work, and it is happening. We're not living like this anymore. Get to update all the docs. And then you get to update your code. So, default only when there's a best answer. If there's several likely behaviors, don't lock yourself into the trap of answering support requests on all of them. So the last thing I want to talk about is errors. So errors, at one time in JavaScript, we were like, in happy fun land, like, we're on the browser, we'll just throw errors to the browser, and it'll be really great. And then we'll hit F12 and we'll see them. And then this happened. This is directly out of the Node.js docs. Any use of the JavaScript throw mechanism will raise an exception that must be handled using try-catch, or the node process where it will exit immediately. So, who's had this happen? Oh yeah. So as library authors, we were like, you're gonna use it on a server, and then the error's gonna happen, and we're gonna crash the server? Oh God. And for a long time, people got this idea that like libraries should never throw errors. Never throw errors in a library, you will kill things. But that's difficult too. So I actually, like any good software engineer, I went to Twitter and I was like, does Node give any official guidance about this error thing several years in? And it like exploded into a massive Twitter conversation that lasted like 4 hours. And the only feedback I really got from Node is that Miles cares a lot about errors. He wanted me to tell you. So Miles cares a lot about errors. But the general consensus on the thread can be summed up as throw on obvious developer error. So let's break that one down. Here's Moment doing actually a pretty good job at his thing. This is a date, and it's probably user input. And user input is always potentially junk, right? So we don't want to, every time a user enters a date, if that date isn't in the format that we want, start exploding Node servers. So instead what happens is that we very politely take your input and we say, oh, you have tried to format this. Invalid date. And then maybe your one user with the bad input sees invalid date, but at least we haven't taken out your Node process. So this is good. Bad user input doesn't crash. But then we have this other thing going on. You can use a get on Moment to get the hours date part, moment.getHours. And this looks great. It gets us back 13. That must be sometime in the early afternoon that I ran this. But this is weird. I misspell hours. I put in hours, and I get back a moment object. I would completely expect to get a moment object from that method invocation. We should have thrown. At the end of the day, this wouldn't be deployed onto a server in production. This is a developer time error. And it's one that's potentially very difficult to find. You'll go digging through your code and you'll be like, where is it? Why do I see JSON where I should see a string? What the heck? And you'll get all the way down to our library and you'll be like, those people. So let's see an example of this actually being really done well. Who here, this is immutable. People use immutable from Facebook. Sure, good library. What immutable does is it makes immutable collections. So here we're gonna make a map, and anytime we change this map, it's gonna give us a new map. And this is this library doing it very well. We're making a map, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, then we set B, and the first map still has 2, and the second map has 50, so that's what it does. Okay. But it does something awesome here. When I try to make a map of the number 1, which is like impossible, because like, how do you map the number 1? It actually tells me, hey, developer, we expected an array or an iterable object. Could you hand that over? This is good. When it comes to errors, if it's going to happen at runtime, if it's about the parser user input, then you're going to want to try to suppress as best you can for Node.js. But if you can tell, like the dev fat-fingered something, help him out and undo the fat finger. So, in conclusion, just make stuff easy to use. Don't get fancy. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about, oh, what are the functional paradigms I can use here, and how beautiful can my code be, and what toolchain can I have? At the end of the day, all the libraries that I've shown you have lived for years, not because of their amazing toolchains, their small size, or anything other than the fact that people picked them up and were able to use them quickly. So put your investment as a library author, whether internal or external, right there. For invocation, static or factory, one of them's going to work out for you. Chaining may really enhance your problem domain. Options objects for configuration, everybody knows them, and they really do clean things up. Defaults, careful, careful. When there is an obvious right answer, then pick that to be your default, but don't pick an arbitrary default. Do not do it. And finally, throw for those obvious developer errors. Those will make it so that your users aren't sitting there complaining about how you are a horrible person and they couldn't find this really mysterious bug in their code. And after that, just share. Get out on GitHub, get inner source through your company, get people contributing to your library internally, and be friendly and be open to new ideas. All right, well, thanks everybody. I love questions, so.
Wasn't that fantastic? Come on, more rounds of applause, please. Woo!